Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this HEPI event on the day of the REF results. It's a very short and sweet session we've got this afternoon. We've billed it as an in-conversation. There's one guest, which is David Sweeney, who's already been described today as Mr. REF, which I think is an accurate description, Executive Chair of Research England, though, of course, REF is a UK-wide exercise. And as others have pointed out today, if Euro 2020 can take place in 2021, then REF 21 can take place in 2022. And so that's why we're here today. The format will be David's going to do a little piece to camera to get anything off his chest that perhaps he's not been able to get off his chest so far today, or correct any misconceptions, just for a small number of minutes. And then I will put some questions to David. I did tip him off about issues I might raise, but I've changed my list without telling him, so he won't be necessarily briefed on all of those, but I know he'll be able to answer very well. And then thirdly, for the last 10 minutes or so, we'll turn to questions that listeners and watchers have put in the chat. So do use the chat, keep the Q&A for technical questions, use the chat, and do upvote as well, because I'm sure we won't get through every question put, but hopefully we can get through the questions that are upvoted to the top of the tree. It's all on the record. We are recording. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick Hillman. I'm director of HEPI, and we at HEPI have been running a series of blogs on the REF since last Saturday. So do catch up with those. But David, no further ado, over to you. I don't know if you're feeling mainly happy, relieved, concerned about the next step in the process, distributing the money, but what would you most like to get off your chest?
I'm happy, positive, optimistic, all those things. I may be occasionally the visible face of the REF, but of course it's a marvellous team effort. Stephen Hill, who was around yesterday, chairs the REF steering group with tremendous engagement from the Scots, the Welsh and the Northern Irish. And Dr. Kim Hackett has done a brilliant job with her REF teams. So not fair really to see me as Mr. REF, just Mr. Visible Face at times. Yesterday, somebody who only engages in this sort of thing at REF results time, so every 7 years, said to me they've been looking back to 2014 and they were astounded how much had changed. For those of us in the system on a day-by-day basis, perhaps some of that change isn't what we dwell on. It's day-to-day things that we dwell on, and we don't take account of how much has changed. And things were rolled off to me, and I thought, oh yes. So I now approach the results thinking in 7 years' time, there's probably going to be some similar kind of change, some of which we can predict, lots of which we can't. So we must tackle this set of retrospective results with prospective aims and policies in mind. And that's very much where I am. We couldn't be in many ways in a stronger position. Of course, there are caveats for that. Generally, the position of the UK with loads of world-class work going on has been validated. And I'm just not interested in minor gradations of world-classness. We are doing a great job. And I know that from my many trips to other countries, quite explicit respect shown in the White House, for example, about what we are doing in the UK. In Japan with their government, China with their government. Now there's sensitive issues about collaboration, but the respect that we are held in addition to the REF results, validates where we are. In the last 7 years, we've seen a tremendous further engagement of our universities, certainly with business, but also with different groupings of all kinds, social activities, health activities, and so on. Universities have really changed gear and the scale of their interaction, and a lot of that is captured in the REF. They've become more outward looking. They've become more engaged with national policy issues, some of which, one has to be honest, have been very, very difficult. But nevertheless, universities have engaged, and I remain of the view I had then, and it's been reinforced, that the future of the country depends really on universities and their staffs working together with as far as possible agreed policy aims, and while accepting that there'll be differences. So I think the REF has delivered support for that view of the world. I hope to have enough funding to be able to recognise the excellence. We know that there's lots and lots of great stuff which we hadn't captured fully before, which we are now well aware of, and which we want to build on. Of course, we also want to build on the stuff we've always known about because it's tremendous. So for me, there's big challenges going forward. Our allocations will be a step in that, and the active engagement of universities and their staff on every aspect of research and development policy will, I think, support the country and our place in the world.
Thank you, David. Thank you for looking ahead as well. I wonder, today, some of your former colleagues from your HEPI days who are now in the Office for Students are beating up on universities for grade inflation for degree classes. And some people say there's something similar going on in the REF results because they are, across the board, on average, better than back in 2014. Is that an unfair accusation that there's some grade inflation in some of these assessments?
Yes, and what's more, we shouldn't be building any case that supports that. It's apples and oranges. We're measuring something different, or perhaps lots of things that are different. And I've just no interest in comparison of the numbers now with before. As I said, our general position of we're up there with the best is validated, and I don't care whether we're a little bit more up with the best or a little less. There will be some citation analysis that shows that our basic benchmark of world leading is right, and details don't matter. I understand the beating up that the OFS are given, although, as it happens, I'm not incredibly supportive of that being the way forward. Sorry to my old mates, but I think that's a different thing altogether. It's just a different way of measuring, and there is certainly some justice in the challenge that's going on.
Thank you. And one thing, David, I haven't heard that much spoken about today, though it is, for example, in the Royal Historical Society assessment of the REF that you flagged this morning, is what the impact of COVID has meant on the REF. So if COVID had not happened, but we were still having this conversation, how would the world look different, or did it not actually, in the end, impact the REF so much?
Well, I think it impacted the panels tremendously, and my team. But I think in terms of the outcomes, we certainly have captured a little bit of work at the end that otherwise would have been captured in the next exercise. But as somebody said this morning, it's not a major driver because this is looking at the sector over 7 years. If you honestly believe that research is a long cycle thing, and I do, and you want to give people time and space to produce outputs and to engage with partners to look at how you do develop the most benefit from those outputs, then you stick to the 7-year cycle and you're serious about it. So I think COVID has given us ancillary information, I think, that backs up the view that the UK is in the leading pack in the world on research and development policy. We've also shown the flexibility of the research sector to pivot urgently to address particular needs. But mostly people were working on stuff that we want to continue working on, net zero, AI, and so on. Some of the wonderful cultural stuff, the deep insights that our social sciences provide. I don't think all of that is changed, but temporarily we did it, and we should be proud of it.
And your comment there about 7 years being a suitable cycle, should we read, you've got the Future Research Assessment Programme going on, should we read much into that comment? Because I think one of the things being assessed is potentially a different cycle. Is that not right?
Well, because my period as executive chair ends, and that is by choice, because I've been doing the job for a long time. It's right that somebody else should take that on. No doubt I'll get the chance to have a say into that, but no more say than others who are knowledgeable about the system. So you shouldn't read anything into it. I do think collectively we need to think about whether the view I just expressed is right. I think there is other activity that should be done on shorter cycles, including in the education sphere and actually in the knowledge exchange sphere also. But I wonder at the plans for yearly catch-ups. Not so sure about that. At midterm catch-ups, perhaps there may be insights to be gained. I would understand that. but I think we need to think collectively about the purposes of the REF, not just any particular purpose or indeed the impact on any particular group. I think some of the challenges about future assessment, have we got the cultural drivers right, are spot on. How we assess them is another kettle of fish altogether. But the more we can take a rounded view of what we're trying to achieve, and the more we're seen to be taking into account the others that are in the system and not just arguing for our own particular role, the better this system will be.
Thank you. And can you tell us what most pleased you, saddened you, and surprised you about this year's REF?
I don't think, to be honest, there's anything that saddened me. I think because everybody's pulled together at it. I'm particularly pleased that we've been able to incorporate all staff, and on the basis of the input we've had, that's been a constructive discussion with greater transparency for the staff and greater ability for the staff to ask for support for what they do. So I'm particularly pleased about that. I'm pleased that we've moved away from arguing about impact to developing richer views of it. Some of that cropped up on the Times Higher call this morning. I would be really sad if we stopped recognizing the very different kinds of impact that all disciplines make. I think we are significantly above every other nation in the way we look at impact. And I was accused at a meeting by a colleague from Germany that in the UK we were obsessed with impact. I just don't think that's the case. I think there's a balanced approach to excellent outputs, the right environment, which probably does require quite a lot more attention, I think, and to the benefits that we give. I thought that said more about the attitude of that person. I want to say that everybody in Germany takes that view than it does about us.
Are you confident that impact is now so well embedded that any future government of any different colour or the same colour continuing would retain it in future waves?
Well, how that happens is always a question. I think it's very, very clear to me that the government is primarily interested in what research and development does for the nation and the world. It's not interested in what it does for individuals, proud though it is when we get Nobel Prizes and academic recognition. And that's a perfectly reasonable view for a government to have, given that it's been implemented in a way that is really supportive of our talented researchers and of the teams that they have. So I think we've got a good balance. I can't see us moving away from consideration of impact because it's what drives the government in giving us the money. I have just come, I've walked across from Horse Guards from a relatively long chat with colleagues in the Treasury, which of course is not, we can't discuss, but I wouldn't be saying all that if it wasn't based on evidence of this very day.
Thank you. And one issue which there has been a lot of discussion about today, but it is so important that I'm going to raise it again, which is selectivity versus levelling up. So if you look, for example, and I know Research England doesn't put a huge weight behind anybody's league tables, and you don't do your own, but research professional have Oxford, UCL and Cambridge at the top three for the third, at least the third REF running. Your own comment in the Times Higher this morning was that actually this year's REF shows the golden triangle is golden, but the rest of the country is slightly better than we realized at a lot of research. And how do we address that when it comes to the next stage of the REF in the funding formula? I mean, especially if there isn't much more money on the table.
I'm confident we'll have sufficient of an envelope to recognise success in the REF. I'm sure that almost everyone will say we haven't recognised it enough. I did say to the Higher that it's possible there'll be changes, but I could hardly say there won't be changes because we've got to take that through our council, and I've got to leave open the possibility. Equally, we have not signalled, and this of course is now very much an English statement rather than a UK statement. We have not signalled that we're going to consult on changed methods. So we're not going to have a radical change in the way we do things. I've read some comment about, well, the REF is just designed to concentrate funding. Really, that's an old-fashioned view, I'm afraid. There's no doubt in the first few years I was in the job, the clear steer from government was that we needed fewer, larger research teams, and we didn't need excessive, well, duplication is not right, but we didn't need the same thing happening in lots of places. I think it's perfectly clear to me that the levelling up agenda comes with an assumption that there'll be sufficient research capacity in different regions, and how we interpret that, again, a bit of work, that a range of problems can be tackled in those regions, particularly those which are distinctive to those regions. I think that's a complementary approach to top research. But I do agree, there's an element of funding tension which we'll have to play out. I think collectively we should look at the research system as a whole, and as the new UKRI aim says, we should look at research and development delivering for every citizen.
Thank you. And there may be some limit in how you can answer this question, but of course the government has a target of 2.4% of GDP on R&D, public and private and charitable money, all the money's rolled together. And of course, if we got much closer to 2.4%, there would just be more money in the system. Are you fairly optimistic that we will continue at least in a trajectory towards 2.4%?
I'm confident the government will deliver on its part. Perhaps it won't always deliver quite as fast as we would like, but I think when you see what's happened with the economy, I don't think it behoves us to complain too loudly if occasionally things don't happen as fast as we want. But the intention should be there and the plans should be there. I think a lot depends on private funders. I think we have to play a larger part, as the government keeps saying, in working with private funders to stimulate additional investment. It's why I'm so pleased with our Research Partnership Fund, which has delivered more than twice, 2.4 times match funding. We've got to do more of that. But I think my real feeling about any target is, if we get there and we've been successful, all I would be wanting to do is make the case to go further. If we eventually run out of evidence that we're making a difference, then perhaps that changes. I know of no country in the world where you would say that at the moment.
Thank you. I'm going to put another 3 or so questions to you, and then I'll turn to a couple of questions that have come in. And if anybody else wants to pose some questions in the Q&A, please do so. Impact case studies. I know they're not the main focus today, but they're incredibly important. There's north of 6,000 of them as part of this REF process. But of course, it's easier for everybody probably to deal with the high level numbers and the league tables and the rankings, rather than really getting into the detail of those case studies. How can we as a sector best use those case studies with policymakers?
Well, I think by investing effort to synthesize them and do that with the help of the people that we want to influence, and be clear that we're being dispassionate. Many years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe more even, I spent a happy evening looking at the case studies in education on school performance. It took me 2 hours to read about 20 case studies, because they were only 4 pages long, and bits of them are about describing what's happened rather than about the benefit. 2 hours to read 20. At the end of that, I felt I had some summary messages, which my wife was a head teacher. I could go and discuss with her and talk around her view of school improvement. Now, I think there's many, many areas where the case studies can be simply analysed, actually by anyone, because they're so short and they're not technical and they're readily available in a searchable database. So my answer is, it's a tool for everyone to use. It's not, though, it's not a blunt instrument to strike people over the head with. And just occasionally, I think we play that role in our engagement with policymakers. We want interaction. We want to listen as much as we talk. And I'm delighted for the work that CAPE and UPenn have done, for example, on stimulating that kind of discussion.
Thank you. I'm actually only going to put one more question to you because they're flooding in now, the questions from the attendees. I just want to put one question to you, which again, I haven't heard that much spoken about. Our sector is in many respects the middle of culture war issues, whether it's free speech issues or even things around intergenerational battles for financial resources. None of that has really, it seems to me, hit research fairly and squarely, but in some countries, decisions about what should be funded in terms of research are very political decisions. We've managed largely to avoid that here with peer review and the sector deciding its own priorities. Are you worried that in time, those wider culture war issues could come to corrupt some of the sort of impartiality and objectivity in systems like the REF?
Well, I do think that that's a risk that needs to be managed. I think it's managed, though, by us understanding what the drivers are from those in government and in other funding roles, and trying to work constructively with them. One of the great damage things from Brexit has been the polarization that's happened, and some very strong and perfectly reasonable views held by people in the research system. We've got to move past that. Whatever happens with Horizon, we've got to think, how do we engage constructively? We've not got to, I think, refight battles. We've got to think how we make the best of whatever situation we end up in. The government's been very supportive of association. It listened to what we said. I think there's certainly some chance, and I know absolutely no more than anybody watching the news, that either the Commission will take certain decisions or our government will do things that lead to that not happening. If that doesn't happen, the number one priority is to think, how do we work together as a sector to derive the benefits there are for the UK, and that we maintain our contribution to the global effort in research. And we need to do that positively rather than fighting. I'm not suggesting that's going to be easy. I think it's possible, though. And I think we need to lay some of those culture war things to bed. But I absolutely accept that that requires work from our universities, who could at times have been more responsive. But also, I think there's a key responsibility in those in various government and other roles who are contributing to the said culture wars.
Thank you, David. Let's move on to the questions that are coming in from people who are listening. And the first one, very, very important issue, mental health of staff. We know staff have been under huge pressure. Is the burden of the REF a problem adding to that problem?
Okay, well, first of all, let me say that in any performance management system in other sectors, you get assessed a lot more often than once every 7 years. And you also typically get assessed by managers, whereas the REF uses peer review supported by experts who are research users. It's got things going for it. Also, what you're asked to do is what you'd be doing anyway, publish outputs. And with the relaxation on the number to be produced, and only 1 in 7 years, that really, I think, takes a significant amount of the pressure off. But equally, I accept that universities are trying very hard to manage their research effort, and some of the things they do are quite challenging for staff. I accept that our system with lots of short-term posts, which is the same as in most countries, does require inspection, and there's a case for certain changes to that. But I think also we need to give more support to our staff in a number of areas, which is difficult, partly because of the culture wars stuff at the moment. So it's not perfect, but I don't think the REF itself is the main trigger for that. And I suspect if we didn't have a REF, we'd have the same kind of issues, but focused in an institution, because the institutional management wouldn't be acting so much on independent evidence as it can do now.
Thank you, David. And of course, it all costs money as well, doesn't it, to make sure there's sufficient support for staff. There's a question about art and humanities and the number of submissions falling. And I know there's been some press coverage of this as well. And I don't know how much you feel able to dwell today upon specific disciplinary areas, but the question is about departmental closures and how that might affect perceptions of research impact, specifically in the arts and humanities area.
Well, I think that this is quite a difficult knot to untangle. First of all, there are cases where people have submitted as indeed in my old university, music and drama were submitted together, although they are two departments. So it's not quite as simple as that. And also, there are departments where the students have just largely disappeared and where therefore there's not so much of a submission. That's particularly true in the modern languages. It's desperate, but I spent some time in HEPI actually as part of the languages support. And I think the problem goes way beyond universities. But my number one point actually would be that the future of the humanities is not in beating itself or anybody else up, but in boasting about the tremendous contribution they make in terms of insights and culture, and the tremendous insights they provide to those of us who work in other disciplines. I made the joke yesterday when Dinah referred to Trollope, that of course Trollope was an innovator. His report to the Channel Islands actually introduced post boxes there, and a year later to the UK. The fact that he was writing creatively meant he was also a brilliant thinker, and he could crystallize that in a set of recommendations. Many humanities people I know are just like that. So I think there are issues, but they are first-class citizens doing an essential job for our role as a research superpower. I am so proud when I go abroad and people talk about what we do. So let's be positive and let's look for opportunities to grow our humanities research effort because we are a key part of the global research discussion.
Thank you, David. We've only got a couple of minutes left, sadly, because we promised this would be short and sweet. I've stupidly moved the question over into answered, but it hasn't been answered. The single most popular question is by Aileen Fife and about the environment. What do all the environment statements tell us about the state of research culture and the areas still needing work? We've talked a lot about impact. We've talked about the quality of the submissions, but what about the environment, the research environment?
Well, I don't think we've analysed them enough to know, and it's exactly people like Aileen who can help us do that, given that I've followed her writing and she's made a really substantial contribution to the way, into considerations around the dissemination of research. So we need to do more work and be committed to doing that formally. As I've said elsewhere, I don't think we've got to the position where we can truly assess what is excellent on research environment. There's more work to be done. Ottiline, my chief executive, is very hot on this. And almost in this very room I keep saying to her, I agree with you, Ottiline. Now tell me what we might do, because I'm that sort of person. And that's what I would say to Aileen and many others. I think I referred to a piece that was published in the Times Higher earlier. We are committed to that, but we're not committed to botching something together. We want the same kind of agreement and sector commitment as we've had on many other things. It took some time to get there on impact, but boy, did we get that commitment. You don't all have to agree, but we've got to move forward.
Thank you, David. The final question from the attendees, which is actually going to be my final question too, is except there's one sort of personal one, because we'd all love to know what your plans are for the future. But Madeline Barrow says, what is the one thing you would change for future refs, if you were staying?
Actually, I think I would have some way of I think the thing I've just referred to. I'd have some way of capturing what's required of a better research environment, and then incentivizing it in some way. I think that's the hole we've got at the moment, and I'm not keen on layering on additional things for the ref to do. We overread the results tremendously in terms of where's the UK's position and is one discipline better than another. I think we've got to look for simpler things, but do them better.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. I apologise for anyone whose questions I didn't get to. I'm afraid it's the old rule of webinars that the questions start flooding in just as you start running out of time. But David, just before you go, will we still be seeing you in the research world after you've left REF? Do you have plans for the future, or?
Well, I do tend to spend some more time with the grandkids and following my many interests. But every day of my working life since the 16th of August 1976 has been spent either on research or on broader education issues. And I would love to contribute in a way that supports the system as a whole, perhaps supporting specific things, but it supports the system as a whole. I am committed to the next 7 years showing the UK universities play an even larger part in making this country the place that collectively we want it to be, and in the world having the research superpower status that is influential and benefits citizens in all countries. So no, I don't have a series of plans, but perhaps opportunities will arise to support the sector in some way.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you. And don't forget HEPI when you're deciding who you might write for in the future or contribute towards. I just want to end this webinar really by thanking particularly you, David, and your colleagues at Research England and UKRI, including some of those you mentioned my name, like Stephen Hill, and also your media people for letting us insert this event with only 48 hours notice into the media plans. And also to everyone for registering with such short notice and engaging with this. So thank you. I'd also like to thank my colleagues, particularly Emma Marr, who's been behind the scenes making sure it all happens. Also Lucy Hare, actually, whose idea this event was, and my other colleagues, Alexis and Laura, who've helped advertise it and have been tweeting away in the background and things like that while we've been on screen. So David, thank you very much. I know we'll all be engaging with you between now and July when the funding formula will be determined. And thank you again for giving up your time this afternoon for doing this.
Thank you. Bye.